Shahnameh Stories, The Seven Labours of Rostam, Haft-Khane Rostam, The Battle with the White Deev, Part 5. As we have seen in previous illustrations of Rostam killing the White Deev, the violent horror of the stabbing changes over time to introduce emotion and camaraderie between the two. Similarly, the pictorial range, coloration, and vivacity become an intoxicating kaleidoscope that sets off the dreadful darkness of the battleground. The eerie faces in the cold, grey, stony settings of the 15th century have given way to rainbow rays in between which troubled trees and flustered flowers break out of the boundaries of the borders. This mesmerizing multichromatic magic reaches its height in the 16th and 17th centuries, where the illustrations are simply sublime explosions of euphoric enchantment. And, as to be expected, none is more spectacular than that of the Shahnameh of Shah Tahmasp. This glorious painting is attributed to Abdul Wahhab, who follows in the footsteps of his illustrious master Sultan Muhammad in evoking a spellbinding setting where ethereal colors stream, spill, and seep into one another. Against the luminous landscape of molten gold, a motley cast of human, beast, demon, and spirit rock spectators look through an iridescent jagged wreath into the black abyss wherein Rostam grapples with the White Deev. The closeness of the interior is intensified by the interlacing branches bursting with flowers and the glowing semi-precious rocks that surge, pulsing and hissing with life as they slope and lean in to watch the combat. Embellished by the naturalistic trees and flowers, frantic flailing twigs sprout out of the inhabited rocks. The painting virtually spins with energy, yet never loses its focus on the mortal struggle at its core. Chuckling condescendingly, the good-natured White Deev greets the dagger thrust into his liver and the sight of his fleeing, jingling leg staggering back out of the cave with bemused incredulity. His elegant clothing and adornments complement Rostam's finery as the exquisite folds of their silk gold-embroidered tunics unfurl to magnify the force of Rostam's pounce and the thud of the Deev's plummet under him. Within this splendid symphony of hues, the distress of the moment is communicated by the commotion of the blossoming trees and bewildered flowers, as their terror is captured by the torrent of bright red blood with which the chopped-off leg hollers its misery at the petrified rock rabbit. From the late 16th century onwards, the mood is increasingly expressed by tension within the landscape, where the beautifully choreographed tones ripple over one another, pressing down tighter and heavier, suffocating the White Deev's lair. Here, gorgeous blues, pinks, and purples cascade to form the rocks that swirl and swerve right and up around the cave. The hollow is shaped to accommodate the contours of Rostam's arched back and raised arm, and the Deev's intact and chopped-off legs as they push through and fall respectively against the whirling rocks. Ulad, anchored in orange against the sturdy tree, turns away, while Rakh looks on aghast as the smaller bushes at the lower left peer peevishly at the Div staring at them. Blood and gore become minimized, and here non-existent, as the grisliness of the event is externalized through the rupture of rocks and vegetation that blast out of the painting. The surrender and defeat of the white Div is encapsulated in the gesture of the raised human hand that pushes against the den roof that, like his life, is closing in on him. The rawness of the pain is felt by the exposed bare bark and branches of the trees, whose leaves have fled in alarm. The force of the eruption has blurred the pensive and empathetic rock faces into convulsing gusts of ghosts and ghouls. A rather delightful addition to these later paintings is the white cheetah, whose stealthy strides steady the rush of the rocks as its coat crowns the spotted white trio of the Div's body and Rostam's helmet. The elongated leopard stalks on the ridge that twists up above the cave next to the distorted branches of the tree to which the bare-headed Oulad stands crisscrossed. As mentioned before, 17th century works such as those of Moin Mossavar, the notable student of Reza Abbasi, were frequently signed and dated, suggesting the painter's growing sense of independence and self-awareness. Moin, the prolific artist whose palette we have analyzed, painted numerous versions of the seventh Khan that bear comparison. Here, the foliated branches of the plane tree spread and burst through the upper margin to swing and wave over the precipice, accentuating its leftward direction that is carried over by the lunge of the boulders and shrubbery. The vaporous pastel crags outlined in red that press down upon the cramped cavern have multiplied and filled with slow swarming spirits that skulk and squirm between the webbed arteries of the spongy, brain-like organism. Inside, the refined Rostam plunges his dagger into the tall, dapper white Div, who stares sullenly at the spray of blood over his long, flowing tunic. His white beard reminds us of his elevated status as the formidable and wise chieftain of the Divs of Mazandaran. The severed leg lies beneath the mace roundels, whose bulbousness seemed to buoy up the demon to give a floating effect to the spotted white pattern that lifts the eye up through the arm clutching Rostam's collar to his helmet and the plume that angles and tips to settle on the crouching cheetah. In the lower right corner, Rakhsh's profiled head, dappled with red spots, gives the illusion of having been squirted with the Div's blood. The various renditions of the story by Moin continue, yet are all astonishingly different enough to make each novel. As seen in the lower right, Moin's signature that follows the traditional formula of humility often appears in minuscule characters in the center of the lower margin, and here with the date 1077 or 1666 to 67. Behind the cave in the two left paintings, Moin has included a young page whose curiosity reverberates through the shrubs, tree, and rocks as they all peer over and through the cracks to get a close look at the demon's demise. In these, although the palette has changed to include his signature bright blue puffs of sky, clouds, and bushier trees rendered with thick, rapid brushstrokes, the artist has only slightly modified his earlier illustrations. Rostam wears the pointed steel helmet found in the 15th century paintings, substituted for his usual leopard skin headdress and here adorned with a pink plume. Mu'in's divs are, like the coloured ones that we saw in the second story of Tahmures the Div Binder, often humanoid and stylized with heavy jewels including a thick choker. Here, both the left dainty div with the curled coif, red lips and flaming gold eyelids, and the right with fine arched eyebrows, stare with wise wistful reproach into the eyes of a seemingly sympathetic, almost regretful Rostam. The soft pink rocks sway as if in moan, camouflaging the youth within their cresting crevices, whose red outlines on the right stream like splattered blood over Rakhsh's protruding head. Finally, in a rarely depicted scene from the Windsor Shahnameh, we see a young Rostam carefully and gently applying the blood from the liver of the white div to the grateful Kekavus's eyes and thereby restoring his sight. This unusual manuscript contains 148 paintings attributed in part to the Esfahani artist Muhammad Yusuf, an apprentice of Reza Abbasi. It was commissioned by an Armenian military commander in the service of Shah Abbas the Great. Having ended up in the hands of Ahmad Shah Durrani, the founder of the modern state of Afghanistan, it was subsequently gifted to Queen Victoria by his descendant Kamran Shah in 1839 in gratitude for her support of the Afghans against the Qajar dynasty. In the next video, we shall enter the modern era and look at how the story of Rostam and the White Div has been interpreted and utilized from the 19th century to the present day.